So I'm trying to think back to where I was on the 6th of January, 2021. Now, Kenosha, I'm sitting in a vehicle and I'm listening to NPR, National Public Radio, and they're reporting over the radio that our nation's Capitol building is under siege, being attacked. Now, at first I'm thinking, well, maybe this is some type of, sarcastic reporting by some type of journalist. So I scurried out of the vehicle, ran into the closest establishment with a television. And on every television in the establishment, every channel was showing thousands of people storming our nation's Capitol building. And, this is a moment of extreme peril. Extreme peril. And we're at a real inflection point now. We now have to make a crucial choice, Kenosha. A crucial one. You know firsthand. Yeah, you experienced this before the rest of the nation did. And that's why I wanted to come here first and talk with you folks. You saw up close and personal the carnage that Donald Trump's presidency caused on August 25th, 2020. A group of individuals armed with AR-15s came to your community, your city, to terrorize largely peaceful demonstrations concerning Black Lives Matter. Many of these individuals were there under the direction, whether implicit or explicit, of the sitting president of the United States. After all, the entire summer up until that point, the president had been showing, signs of not believing in democratic values and norms, attacking American citizens for exercising their right to peacefully redress their government. Yeah. And we know why he attacked Black Lives Matter. Because by then he knew those folks weren't going to be supporting his re-election campaign. Yeah. That's when you saw the beginning of the retribution. The beginning. Yeah. And that night, individuals who had supported Donald Trump, Kyle Rittenhouse in particular, who had been in the front rows at numerous Donald Trump rallies, pretended to be a medic, as the story goes, and in cold blood murdered 2 American citizens. Now, these protests in Kenosha were as a result of a law enforcement officer shooting Jacob Blake in the back multiple times. The community of Kenosha decided they wanted to have a crucial conversation with their law enforcement agency. And yet someone who was 17 years of age at the time, from as far away as Antioch, Illinois, decided he was going to drive and put himself in harm's way with a group of individuals, many of them ex-military, I might add, and go and terrorize folks simply because they did not agree with their ideological and philosophical viewpoints. Yeah. Now, Kenosha, it's time for some straight talk. There were many, many protests. Some left-leaning, some more conservative-leaning in 2020. We only had folks show up who deputized themselves with AR-15s at Black Lives Matter rallies. I don't think that's coincidental. I think that was done purposefully. Now, these folks wanted to terrorize American citizens who they didn't agree with. Now, and tragically, sadly, 2 people were murdered by Kyle Rittenhouse. Vigilante justice. Carnage in your streets. Yeah. Now, we saw many, many, many conservative influencers justify the events of August 25th, 2020. You know? But this wasn't the first time they justified violence at the hands of Donald Trump's supporters. No, not at all. Kenosha, one of the first rallies Donald Trump ever did, back in 2015, there were counter-protesters. This was when you could, go to a political rally and not agree with the candidate and voice that. And what usually occurred was maybe you were ushered out by the security after a while of heckling someone. But no, at this particular rally that Donald Trump threw, he had his goons attack an individual, assault a man, punch him. And I never will forget, after charges were filed against the person who was assaulted, Donald Trump called into Fox and Friends. You all remember this. If you don't, I'll remind you. He called into Fox and Friends, and he offered to pay the legal bills of the individual who assaulted an individual, simply for not supporting it. Yeah. Political violence. And we saw this time after time after time after time at Trump rallies. Violence. Americans assaulting other Americans. Man, people who didn't support Donald Trump got the message very quickly that you couldn't show up to any of his events and not, be in lockstep with the dictator. When he says he wants to be a dictator from day one, Kenosha, that's because he already has been. His day one was when he came down the escalator. That's when it started. And the sickness has only grown far, far worse now. If you ask me, if I had to give a prognosis, Kenosha, It's terminal at this point. There's no recovery for those folks. Rittenhouse, after he unalived these two individuals, was invited to the White House by the sitting president. And he was famously photographed giving the thumbs up. Now you all, I made many videos, many, and I've said that, the individuals, whenever they do something, they always feel as though they've done it at the behest of Donald Trump. No matter how heinous, no matter how cruel, no matter how inhumane, it always circles back to him. Yeah. They completely invisibilize Anthony Huber. Completely. So let me shed light on who Anthony Huber was. Anthony Huber was someone born and raised in Kenosha, Wisconsin. He was from the community. And he was there with his girlfriend at the time to document, for historical purposes, the rallies in Kenosha. Yeah. And he was also there to pay his respects to his dear friend, Jacob Blake. They grew up together. They knew each other. Yeah, they were close friends. And he felt what the police in Kenosha had done to Jacob Blake, who was simply trying to break up a fight, and tried to explain to the officer that he wasn't involved in the skirmish or situation, when the officer pulled him by his t-shirt and shot him point blank multiple times in the back. Anthony Huber was there to show his respect for Jacob Blake. Once Rittenhouse shoots at the crowd, murdering Joseph Rosenbaum, Anthony Huber, being a hero that he was, decided he wanted to try to tackle and disarm a murderer by the name of Kyle Rittenhouse, who had come to your community and did just that. And tragically, he was shot and unalived as well. Yeah. This is what happened. And Donald Trump, instead of paying any sympathy for the individuals who lost their life, decided he wanted to be photographed and smile with a serial killer and give the thumbs up. Huh. This is our choice, Kenosha. We have a choice. A real, serious choice. You know, we look at January 6th, the events that occurred. Gallows and nooses erected by his supporters on the Capitol grounds. Windows shattered. Congressional offices ransacked. Walls and floors spread with feces. The vice president having to be ushered into security tunnels underneath the Capitol. Scurrying literally for his life. And we had a president at the time who wants to be president again. And whilst the Capitol building, the nation's Capitol building, was being attacked, for 3 hours, he was AWOL. He was in dereliction of his duty, Kenosha. Yeah, for 3 hours. Now, we don't know what he was doing precisely. Only the president knows what he was doing. But we've heard reports that he was watching this as it was unfolding. We've seen slightly edited short video footage of the entire family. Yeah, the president, his sons, his daughter, all standing there watching as this occurs. Yeah. We've heard reports that he was in the dining room enjoying this. Now, as our nation's capital was being ransacked, smashed, people grabbing things. We tragically had another individual by the name of Ashley Babbitt, who was, shot and unalived. She was given a command to not breach a certain area, and yet she continued to violate that command. Now, we know from reporting and research that a large portion of the individuals who came that day decided they wanted to storm the Capitol. Many of them were in private militia groups. The Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, 3%ers. Yeah. These were the individuals that he was going to, and still plans to use, and infiltrate our government from within to overthrow our nation. Yeah. He said that he should have immunity. Yeah. Understand that, Kenosha. Really. Really stop and think about that. Here's the sitting president of the United States saying that he should have immunity from launching an attack against his own nation. So now presidents, they can attack their own countries. Yeah? He wants immunity because he was the president. Kenosha, do you think he should have immunity to wage war on his own country? Have a faction of extremists decide they want to overthrow the nation? The reason I ask that question, Kenosha, is because, you're not too far away from Ripon, Wisconsin, the birthplace of the Republican Party. And we've seen before when a faction of extremists decided they wanted to succeed from the Union and wage war against the Republic. We've seen that. We also saw on January 6th those same entities enter the Capitol building, this time with their symbols and their flags. Yeah. Kenosha, when Rittenhouse unalived 2 people at a Black Lives Matter rally, that's when I knew what time and what season this really was. Kenosha, when I scurried into that establishment and saw on television, in bright colors, an individual man hoisting a Confederate flag in our nation's capital, inside the rotunda, I knew what time and what season we were in. I don't agree with every policy of many candidates. But Kenosha, I'm going to be honest with you. 2024 is really not about many policies for me in particular. To me, it's about tone and tenor of a leader. Yeah. What type of tone and tenor do you want your leader to set? Because surely we've seen time after time the citizenry, the most extreme element of our citizenry, they will most certainly follow. You know, when Donald Trump attacks district attorneys like he has for Manhattan and Albert and Bragg, his supporters follow suit and send death threats. Yeah. When Donald Trump attacks judges and their families, his supporters send death threats. When Donald Trump attacks election workers, his supporters mail fentanyl-laced letters to election offices all across this country. You know, I might not support Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley, but I most certainly support what she said. She said wherever Donald Trump goes, chaos always follows and ensues. You saw it. First arraignment back in New York. A circus. Americans fighting other Americans outside. You saw it firsthand. You have firsthand experience, Kenosha. You saw it on August 25th, 2020. This was the first summer of COVID. And by then, we were all under public health advisory notice that for our protection, we should stay home and stay safe. Instead, Donald Trump's supporters chose to go outside during a novel virus and violently assault their own fellow citizens simply because Donald Trump, told them lynch mob who to go after. Yeah. This is not new with Donald Trump. He did it to the Central Park Five. He did it to Black Lives Matter. He did it to the mother and daughter election workers in Georgia. And he did it to our nation on January 6th. Quite simply put, Kenosha, if Donald Trump is elected, you might as well go ahead and say what all those folks did on January 6th. Not only was it the right thing for them to do, we as a citizenry will have justified it. And once you justify that a president can wage war on their own nation, Kenosha, we won't have a democracy. Period. That's the end. Yeah. And here's the thing. Once you lose a democracy, it's no guarantee or certainty that you'll ever get it back. Yeah. You look at Russia. You look at China. You can look at a whole host of nation states around the planet. Once they lose democracy, they don't always or easily or ever retrieve it again. I'm not so much worried about Donald Trump nor his supporters. I think they've all made their choice. I'm kind of worried about us who, we're kind of showing complacency and apathy. Kenosha, I'm going to tell you something. Something that's going to be applicable for the entirety of 2024. Yeah. There cannot be any complacency or apathy in war. And make no mistake, Kenosha, when I saw the Confederate flag in the Capitol, when I saw what Rittenhouse did in your community, I full well knew Donald Trump had traumatized America. That he had decided to wage a psychological and a physical war on this republic. We'll have a choice. My mind is settled, Kenosha. What Donald Trump represents, what he embodies, it's not fit to be in charge or lead this nation. We saw in Charlottesville the Tiki Torch boys. Yeah. Those will be the people who he'll stack and put in the military. Like Alex Fields Jr., who was in our service prior to murdering Heather Heyer. We saw the folks that ran into your community, murdered your native son, Anthony Huber. He'll put those folks in our military, in our national security apparatus. The folks who stormed the Capitol building. He said he's going to pardon all of it. Day one. Day one dictatorship. I would argue he's never believed in the democratic norms and principles of this republic. Never. And he attacked us on day one of his presidency. 2024 is it, Kenosha. We can finally get rid of this for good. We can finally close the chapter on Donald J. Trump and the trauma and terror he's caused to the citizenry. He deserves to be held accountable for what he did to all of us. Legally, that's for the government to make their case. Politically, that's for the citizenry to make our case. I would never support an individual or anything remotely like Donald Trump for any type of leadership, let alone the highest office in the nation's land. No. That's just asinine. You know, former Congresswoman Liz Cheney said we were sleepwalking towards authoritarianism. I would agree. Anyone that thinks that it's appropriate to attack the nation's Capitol building due to a former president who was quite simply a sore loser and wouldn't see the fact that he lost a free and fair election. Anyone that thinks that that's appropriate to garner and corral thousands of your supporters to attack and delay the peaceful transfer of power, anyone who thinks that's appropriate, they don't believe in democratic values. They don't believe in democracy. This is it. This is really it, Kenosha. It's not so much about me or even you. It's about what you're going to leave your inheritance to your future. Do you want your children to inherit a fascist authoritarian dictatorship under the cruel and inhumane, unscrupulous Donald J. Trump? Or do you want to continue to have a democracy? Imperfect, but working to make it a more perfect union. We know certainly that Donald Trump will end democracy. Period. He governed that way. And when he was no longer able to govern, when he saw the crescendo and the curtains closing in, he decided that he wanted to send a mob of his own deranged, unhinged, and violent supporters to attack our country. If Donald Trump wins in 2024, democracy loses and it ends. That's our choice, Kenosha. That's our choice.